Welcome to Your Voice to the World. I'm Eddie Pinero, speaker, filmmaker, and storyteller, teaming up with Terrence McMahon, retired CEO and best-selling author. Having built multi-million-dollar businesses and created lifestyle brands enjoyed by millions around the world, we've established a blueprint to do more and become more. Now we're joining forces to inspire you to share your voice and build the business and lifestyle you've always dreamed of. All right, what's up, what's up? I'm Eddie Pinero.
Terrence McMahon.
And welcome to Your Voice to the World podcast, where we help you share your voice
and build your business.
And today's a big day. Storyteller Secrets by Carmine Gallo. We're going to talk about the power of story, how it's integral to everything. Yourself, your business, your relationships. It's fundamental to life in general. It's what we do as humans.
You know, I also heard it was 30% of our GDP depends upon how effective these marketers tell stories. So it's rippling into everything, the power of story.
Yeah, he starts off the book, like he right away paints a picture of just how important it is when he goes into the biology. You remember that? And he starts saying, like, around campfires, hunter-gatherers would hunt. They'd do their thing during the day, and then at night they'd sit there and it would be all story. And that's how they entertain it. Like, it's in our DNA.
He talked about the power of extending the day. Because I guess when there was no light and it was dark out, what can you do? You just go to bed, right?
Yeah.
So you sit around and tell stories. 70,000 years ago, I seen that there was the first evidence of a story. Before language existed, they were pointing and teaching each other through stories. And then that biology is older than a communication skill than language. And verbal words. Isn't that cool?
It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's powerful stuff. And not only the stories that you tell other people, but the stories you tell yourself about yourself.
Big time.
Yeah.
That's a big part of our deal.
I can think of a million times where you just, how you identify and what you believe to be true about yourself ends up being like this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, which is just, I hear that and I just think, like, you know, your deal, your TED Talk is sort of recreating yourself.
Yeah.
You know, mine has been, you know, as a storyteller, as a creator, like, I didn't feel like things took off until I believed I was that, you know, and it's hard. Like, it's hard to see yourself as that, but the tricky thing is once you do, then other people will.
Yeah, the evidence-based belief in yourself. And we're going to talk about the formula, the story formula, that a lot of people that do great ads and screenplays, there's a lot of evidence now with all the box office exit receipts and what stories do well and what one don't about what people like and connect to. But you can use the formula for yourself, and we'll go into a lot of that. And he talked about what I like is I love Greek mythology. He talks about Aristotle, who is the father of persuasion, because storytelling is persuading. Right. When you're talking to somebody and you make a motivational video, it's always a story, but it's always persuading someone to do something. But Aristotle, 1,600 years before Christ, had the story formula and persuasion formula, which was pathos, ethos, and logos. Which is, pathos was passion, and ethos was evidence, and logos is statistics, right? What do you say the blend was?
60, 30, 10. So 60% story.
Yeah.
30% evidence and 10% data, I believe.
Yeah. I had to plunge my, or purge, not plunge. I had to purge my own storytelling. Once I was exposed to that. It's like I was giving way too much data. Right, Goldilocks? Remember Steve dropped the Goldilocks on us last time, which from our last book. But way too much story, or way too much statistics, which is logos.
Yeah. Well, he kind of pokes fun at PowerPoints
Right.
and how people go up with just all these numbers and this data, you know, and I've done it. I would imagine a lot of people have. And
Right.
it's like, that doesn't move people. You got to push the emotional side of things.
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I love when he was like, why, you know, why, I forget who it was he was talking about, but they're like, why would you put words on the PowerPoint? They should supplement the stories you're telling. What do you gain out of people trying to read something else? And I'm like, that's interesting.
Well, you know? Teaching versus telling, I think that's the big distinction that you make, because we all, I mean, I think everyone has a message, and a lot of people are really smart. And I think a lot of people that are really smart get too tied up in making it too complicated, because he talks about making it simple, but also making it in a narrative, a story, which I think is awesome. It's pretty cool.
That is really cool. Stories make the world go around.
They do.
But yeah, I mean, it's that type of thing where, and it's easy for me to understand because it's truthfully, I mean, it coincides with what I do. You know, like the videos that I put out, they're emotionally moving. I mean, that's kind of where I get the bang for my buck. But I can think of times where you deviate from that, and it's like you forget, and you try and paint a picture with numbers, and you need that stuff to supplement the moving story. In other words, if you don't move someone emotionally, you don't have much to work with, because we're emotional beings, and that's kind of right. Again, there's so many data points. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he's talking about buyers and how such a large percentage of them buy not because you've convinced them mathematically that it's smarter, but because you've moved them. Right. You know, and I thought that was a cool way to put it. It's like,
yeah, because you combine multiple senses in your work, right?
Right.
And he talks about the 3 keys to persuasion, which is storytelling, in this book. And the first one is emotion. So you gotta elicit emotion. Mm-hmm. And he talks about novelty, like a new way to hear something. It could be an old idea packaged differently, and then memorable, making someone remember it. And all those together, when you tell a story correctly, and you got to tell it. You know, there's a reason TED Talks are 15 minutes, 16 minutes, because there's something called cognitive overload or cognitive backlog when you just start to phase out.
Right.
But talk about how you combine those multiple, the emotions and the novelty, because you just did one with a lantern. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was new for you.
It was kind of an adventure. So the idea behind it is very emotive. It's this thing like self-reflection, where when I was writing the script for that last year, I promised myself, I was like, dude, you got to take risks. You got to be bold this year. And I'm looking back thinking, okay, well, the year's almost up. How bold were you? You know?
Right.
And it's like, I can look back and there's times where I shoot up in bold, like I do courageous things, right? Our event put me way out of the comfort zone. Certain projects, certain things I did in business and in some regards in relationships. I mean, I could see it, but then when you weigh it all out, the majority of the time, it's just sort of existing. And then you get these peak moments, and then you build a little bit, and you grow a little bit. But anyway, so the idea for that whole thing is like, what if you just embody that courage every day? Like if you can, and it seems similar, but there's nuance there. Instead of like seeking out these big changes, it's like you just look at your life as this one courageous thing, and you don't worry about falling. You don't worry about, any of that stuff, because you get bigger. So that was the emotional side of things. It was like, guys, don't do it once in a while, live it. And then, the novelty was weird. It was a weird video. I was walking around the dark with a lantern.
It was different. I watched it for 15 seconds. I didn't know what I was watching. I thought you were in a mine looking for gold or something. I said, I think you lost your brains. But it was awesome. It's done well, right?
What's that?
The video was done well. It's different.
People seem to like it, yeah. I just got a message on Instagram from a teacher that wrote it on a chalkboard for his class. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, stretch yourself.
Yeah.
What's cool about stretching, because people end up reverting back to what they like to do and what they're most comfortable doing.
It's a story they've told themselves.
Yeah, you retreat back to what you're good at. That was interesting because there's lots of things that, I was a catcher. I used to play baseball, and I caught hundreds of pitchers, and pitchers always have what's called a go-to pitch.
Yeah,
and it's the pitch they throw when they're in trouble. It's like always going to come. Like Mariano Rivera, if you know him from the Yankees, he always threw cut fastball. That was his pitch. He pretty much threw it every time because it was his best pitch. But once you got to learn, I think you got to learn new pitches. And this book talks about how important it is to have novelty, something new, which I thought was pretty cool. It's like a new idea. An old idea maybe looked at differently, which is really, there wasn't any new ideas as per se in the video, but you packaged it differently. The music was a little different.
Right.
Which I think is cool. Certainly memorable.
Yeah, and it's the emotion, the novelty that makes it memorable. It's almost like 1 and 2 create 3, I want
to switch gears a little bit. Everybody who listens to us, like literally without exception, we get messages in from everybody. I have something that's important to me. You have something that's important to me. Steve, you have something important to you. Duncan, do anything, right? We came up with that one thing. Mine is to help people recreate themselves in life and business. Going from broken to beautiful. What's yours?
Inspiration to do more and be more.
Yeah, think about that. If you have a message that you want to share, my coaching would be, and it's in this book here, is you got to make it short. And we, taking that, you might have something really super important to say, but you might get it clouded up with too much logos, too much logic, and too much ethos, too much evidence, and not enough story.
Right.
And what I think is cool about this book is it gives you an opportunity to make something short and easy to understand. Like I think who the Google founders, I forget their names. Sergey and Mike, I think it is. But they came to angel investors and they said their line to them, their one sentence business plan was, we organize the world's information and we make it available for everyone. That was their one thing, which I thought was kind of cool.
It's really cool. It's one of those quotes that's been attributed to everyone. I've seen it, Da Vinci and Steve Jobs, but simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
Right.
It's like, it's very, very challenging to boil everything down to one sentence.
Think about your life, Steve, right? And you're a dunker. Like that's how we met.
Yeah.
You kind of showed me something novel, and you had this ability to dunk, and you wanted to connect the dots from that to something else. You remember the conversation we had about how you do that and what your one line,
right?
The evolution of that was. Tell us.
Well, the one thing that you opened my eyes with was that kind of using my story because I had ideas of like what it taught me, like from dunking, from the things I've learned, and I wanted other people to like apply that to their life. And the one thing you mentioned was similar to this book was that each experience I had, tell a story around it, so that way people can remember it, and also it's relatable that they can consume it. Because without the story behind it, if I just tell them what I learned, it's something that they don't really hold on to, and they could see the start to finish of it.
Yeah. And what was the line?
Dunk and do anything.
Dunk and do anything.
I love that because it's not just dunking, dude, right? It's like a lifestyle.
Yeah, that's what he helped me with. Was like I was trying to tell him like, how do I make this to the next level? Like I want to do it. There's so much I learned from this, but people just see the dunking aspect of it.
It's awesome, man.
Right. And for those of you also that can't see, Steve's not like 7 feet tall. He's like 5'10".
Right.
He jumps like 4 feet in the air and dunks somehow.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But it's a good way to connect the dots through a story. If you were to say that you learned how to dunk, you couldn't dunk, and then you learned how to dunk, and now once you learn how to dunk, you can really do anything.
Right.
Like any investor was like, I have a system that helps people do anything.
Right.
An algorithm, right? That's kind of what a set of steps, a recipe to do anything. Break it down, build it back up.
Yeah. And speaking, like, the whole algorithm thing, it's like, the Steve's dunk situation, like, I looked at stories, and I just want to make this clear for any viewer that maybe this light bulb hasn't gone off yet, because it took me a while. A story isn't necessarily, all right, I'm going to tell you about a time, or like some verbal articulation of what's going on. Like every single thought you have is in the parameters of some type of story, some idea you're telling yourself, something you believe to be true. And so he really hits on that in this book. It's like, from your beliefs to the life you live, your routines, all of that is, pieces of some story that can be changed, that can be recreated, that can be lived differently, told differently. Right. And I just think that's important. Story is everything.
Right. And there's an algorithm to the story building process, right?
Right.
We talk, you think about the movies, and because he has 3 keys to packaging it. So let's pretend you have something that's important to you, and you got to package it. Like, how do you package a story. So you can tell your own story. You can tell someone else's story, or you can tell a story about history. You can use someone else's story to build it. But the three elements of building a story is backstory, right?
Yep.
And then usually is some kind of character. Joseph Campbell calls it the hero, and then the hero has some form of conflict, and then there's some kind of resolution and transformation. It could get more complicated than that.
But we're simple. We're in simple mode
like
right
what's
now.
What's your 3-part story?
Backstory.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it would be someone that was in a place where they weren't happy and sort of made a transformation, and was looking to grow and do something a little bit differently. Someone who likes to create, likes to inspire, likes to help people, likes to tell stories. And then the conflict would be sort of the everyday peaks and valleys, sort of battling the challenges that come with changing yourself and relearning some things and changing some stories and your self narratives. And the resolution, I would argue, are the successes along the way.
Right, where you ended up.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause a good story takes you somewhere. It's a journey. It transforms you. Takes you from some place to someplace else. Like a lot of those great stories are, like, I think it's Titanic. He talks about, like, Jack and Rose have backstories, right? She was rich, marrying someone she didn't want to marry,
right?
And he was kind of someone like a kind of a grifter that had something to prove. And then if you didn't have backstory, it wouldn't matter whether or not
story's meaningless. About
yeah,
it.
they don't.
Yeah.
No one cares about Titanic. The iceberg has little to do with Titanic.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the story. That's why it sold, James Cameron, right?
Right.
And of course, my 3-part story would be, I went from someone that had a very successful business, and from the outside looking in had it all, and from the inside looking out had a hurricane brewing from a healthcare perspective, and got sick and was labeled labeled a certain way, and probably going to die, and went through a journey of transformation to recreate myself. And I had an epiphany, not about rehabilitating myself, but recreating. That's the 3-part story,
right?
And that's how you do it. That's how you build your narrative. Because if you have something, usually if the 3-part narrative of storytelling is backstory, conflict, resolution, and then you have the 3 parts of packaging the story, which is the storyteller, the formula, and then the delivery. Like, how do you put it all together to make it happen, to make it work? Which is kind of cool. Because you did a TED Talk, right?
I
did one 2 weeks ago. That sucked. It sucked in such a great way. It was a lot of work.
Just the time and energy, right?
Yeah, I literally needed a week off to do nothing. My brain was squashed. But talk about how you took your because this guy also wrote Talk Like TED. That's how I met him. I actually hired Carmine to help me with my TED Talk. I hired him. He does that. He's an expert at getting that story package. But talk about how you got your life's 3-part story into 16 minutes.
I think it was weeding out a lot of the stuff that wasn't completely relevant, and kind of honing in on the peak moments, the peak epiphanies or realizations. So conflict resolution, because that's what I did. It was like 3 pillars. The idea that, look, in life, when you run in the rain, when you embrace discomfort, you grow. So I then focused in on the 3 big things in my life that really propelled me forward. The first being leaving a job and taking an entrepreneurial path. Speaking in front of an audience, something that terrified me, that I wasn't particularly good at. And then the last thing was, leaving. We talked about this on the last episode, sort of leaving my situation, my family, my friends, my girlfriend, my job, all that stuff, and coming all the way down the coast and just sort of recreating myself there too. And so that was the idea: peaks, valleys, and then they grow from chaos comes order, right?
That was you're looking at a new TED Talk.
Yeah, I want to hone in on that even
from
more.
Chaos to clarity.
Chaos to clarity.
Yeah, I think that's what it's like. Again, taking someone on a journey, taking a listener. It's funny that you use 3 too. because he talks about the rule of three.
Yep.
The three bears, the three blind mice, the three musketeers. Like we work in three, and mine was a 3-step algorithm to recreate yourself. That was my TED talk, was from broken to beautiful. An algorithm to recreate yourself. But I had 3 as well.
Right.
Thanks to him. I actually, my book actually had 12. 12's too many.
Yeah.
So I got to
live and learn, right? It's like chopping it down.
Well, you can do 12, I guess. It's like
book's a little different.
But in packaging that into such a short thing, because you write short form copy,
right?
Yeah,
and that's a craft that I've honed that I didn't even realize what I was doing. But that's like a very difficult thing to do, and it's just all I've done for 5 years. So now it comes second nature. I do it all the time. People are like, critique this. What do you think? And I'm just like, there's too much. Remove.
It sucks because you helped me with my TED talk as well. I got it from 25 years of like pure chaos. Like I said, I was like Tommy Boy in The Wolf of Wall Street. Met it and became a person, and I had all these things I wanted to share. It's like, you don't believe what happened, and you're just cutting away massive things.
Yeah,
it's hard to do
because you're emotionally tied to them. They're important pieces,
right?
But
there's a long venue for that, right?
Right.
Yeah, because your average video is what,
like 3-4 minutes, maybe.
Yeah,
it's short. It's short. Get in, make the message, get out. Yeah. Something that I think is so incredible about your story, though, is like, you talk about the big hill you had to climb, and a lot of people have been through some stuff. I'd imagine very few have been through the hell you've been through, and I mean, everyone goes through their own little thing or big thing or whatever, but to be at death's doorstep, that's quite a change in perspective. And Carmine talks about that. He says there's one thing that all good storytellers have in common. It's that they speak from their experiences and their pain and their conflict. Talks about like the grapes. The best grapes grow in, rough soil.
All right.
Like from the difficulty comes the most beautiful things.
Right.
Diamonds, pressure, that type of thing. And my mind went, when I was listening to that, my mind went to your TED Talk, because it's like, dude, death's doorstep. That'll propel you to something new. That's for sure. It
gives you there's lots of things you learn from that. The one thing you learn from, if you're down and you're out and you're busted up, broken, the one good thing about that is that going and moving away from that up in a good way is not hard to do early on.
Right. You're on the ground floor.
Like if you're alive, you win. It's like 100% improvement. And then you start like losing a little bit of weight, and you start moving, and things like that. And you see this a lot in the addiction world. People go away to rehab, and they clean up, and they're making good progress. And it's like, wow, they're making progress. They're coming back. That's why I always encourage. I'm doing a talk on Friday night for that audience, and I was like, you're so broken. It's a little bit of a blessing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but fortunately,
brand new opportunity.
It's from broken to beautiful, and that is a way to tell a good story, is to come out of conflict, because everybody wants transformation. We're human beings. We're like wired to transform. Like every single one of your videos is a journey of transformation
in some capacity. Yeah,
there's always pain. It's somewhere.
Right.
That's why people listen. They want to see the conflict resolved. They wanted to see Jack and Rose saved. Right. And that was I think that's the beauty of Titanic is that the iceberg is like, you think it's a movie about the iceberg, it's like very little about the iceberg.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Makes me want to watch it again. That song, the theme song, judge all you will. That's a top 10 song of my lifetime. My heart will go on.
It's interesting. Like you say that, like it makes me want to talking about it makes you want to watch it, because what happens, there's a science that is, I heard Carmine talk a lot about the science. Like there's one science called neurocoupling. Like if you and I are telling stories and we do a lot to each other, our brains would, if they had sensors, would be lighting up in the same place. Like
I thought that was really cool.
We'd be synced in like massive rapport. And then he says that the chemicals that are released when that happens, dopamine, cortisol, and oxytocin, is a stamp to remember. Like I remember seeing Titanic for the first time. It was like 20 years ago. How old's the movie?
I think 99 it came out, right?
That's 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
20 years ago. You weren't even. How old were you 20 years ago?
6.
You weren't watching Titanic.
Was it 99? Might be somewhere around.
What were you? 1999.
I was in because that was the first time I saw
How old
boobs
were
in a
you?
movie. So I remember
You were like 7, right? You're like a couple years older, right?
I remember talking about that with kids in class. We're like, dude, this
Talking about
something.
I'm gonna flip back because this I don't think everyone realizes how important it is. If you have a message and you want to tell your message and you want to share your story, right? It's got to be short and simple, and it's got to be like a third grader could understand it.
Right.
And Mark Twain said when he wrote books, he'd give them up, and the editor would say it's too long. Mark Twain his famous line is, "I would make it much shorter, but it would take a very, very long time."
Right. Yeah. It's,
So you talk
because
about
it makes you focus on what's important. You
Yeah.
know? And that's the most challenging form of reflection. It's like, what really matters here? You know.
That's interesting. The science that he also shared is called cognitive. This is the part where I'm giving little logos. Cognitive backlog. This is anything over 3 or 4 is too much. Like 3 steps, 4 steps is too much. And that's when people start to phase out. So if you're giving presentations and you're doing PowerPoint slides, the average TED Talk of the big ones he's done, I think he studied 500. He says has 40 words on the slides. Mine has 31 words after I hired him. I had 31 words on my slides.
How much you cut away? Do you remember?
Oh, I cut away dozens of slides.
Yeah.
I could never get to them in 16 minutes. I did a live. Did you do any live ones? I did one live for a group in Boston. It was supposed to be 16 minutes. I was 26 minutes, and my TED Talk was in a week. I said, "How long was that?" He goes, 26 minutes. I go,
"Oh boy."
Yeah, so you got to cut. It's hard.
Yeah.
Decisions to cut away from. So it's parts of the story that sometimes aren't as important as other things are.
So how do you think? Let's switch gears. So if there's someone in the entrepreneurial space or somewhere looking at taking this idea of storytelling and think, okay, how is this relevant to me in what I'm doing and what I'm trying to build? I sort of parse it out into 2 different kinds. The stories you tell yourself and the stories that you're telling others. But what do you think? Like how could we articulate that nicely for them? With regard to how they're looking at things, the stories they're telling.
It depends. It depends what you want your story to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a for-profit story, that would be. I've just heard the statistic today, and I'm not surprised that 30% of our GDP depends upon effective stories by brands. The brand story. In fact, that's a book I think Steve stole from me, but it was on that shelf at one point. It's called Building a Brand Story, where you have a story of the brand, and that's big. But there's also lots of there's pencils for promises for pencils. A big TED Talk where the guy was buying pencils for kids, and he was showing videos and pictures of these kids that had their first pencils, which was pretty cool. But it depends on the story. But if you have something that's important to you, or you've had this transformation or discovery, because all learning comes from mistakes.
Right.
Like Warren Buffett said, that all learning comes from mistakes that don't have to be your own. That's why mentors are important.
I love
in
that.
Books.
Yeah, you can skip the.
There's like so many mistakes. He does a couple talks about bad. What would have been bad if I went off without him, I would have bombed. It was hard as it was, but I mean, who knows if it bombed anyway. But
yeah,
that's it.
So you can have a great product, a great service, a great company. If you're not telling the right story,
yeah,
it's all for naught.
I know it's. Like Domino's had they were growing like crazy, and then there's a story in a book I read that he had pizza and he was selling more pizzas than anybody, and then he had to come up with a story, and his 3-part system was, we're the best pizza place in the world, and their conflict was, we know it sucks and we're going to release this new formula. That was the resolution. It was a 3-part marketing story, and it did really well because Domino's was trying to become the best tasting pizza now, not only the fastest. It was all part of a story. I'm sorry.
Not a Domino's guy.
You?
Hate to say it, yeah. But yeah, a story that I've changed for myself recently is this is kind of a funny thing. So I am a big runner, partially because I love running, But the other part is because I've been dealing with physical issues. And so, like, every time I lift, and I've had coaches and I've had trainers, and the imbalances because of rowing, I think, in college in my body, like, at some point I always get hurt, and it's always the same energy or part. It's like left side of my body, back, elbow. And I started to believe the story that, like, that's just how it is, you know? And then the other day, as I was running, because I can run without injuring myself, I was like, well, why have I settled for that narrative? Like, there's definitely a way to fix and address this. I'm telling the wrong story to myself and other people.
There's also an easy way to get it fixed, because there's someone sitting out there listening to this podcast that knows how to repair that. I'm sure someone has been through it before.
Yeah.
And you're one of the world's greatest speech writers. I mean, you've written speeches for Fortune 500 CEOs, right?
That's
so maybe
my
you can
jam.
barter. Barter.
Fix me. I'll write you a speech.
It's hard to watch you. You run effortlessly, and once in a while you get all banged up working out in the gym, right? You get kinks and stuff in your
it's
neck.
just been a weird thing. I just struggle with it. But
and we're talking also. Have you ever? There's one way that's an easy way to tell a brand story. Just to flip the gears here, if you're a corporation or your company or you provide a service, which a lot of people do,
right.
It's through the concept of case study. It's a very simple way to tell a story, because when we were selling insurance, we could tell a really cool story. And one of them was what I loved about insurance when I was young and really connected to this is that somebody who has nothing, comes from nowhere, can buy an insurance policy. And with their first premium, they can create this massive estate. They might not have anything, so their family has this estate, their death benefit. So we used to talk about that. It's like, you can, with $20, you can create a $250,000 estate instantly. And then there were some times, and there was one in particular that happened in my life where I told that story and the individual ended up dying. So that case study I told to lots of people over the last 25 years, and many people connected with the story and did something they normally wouldn't do, which is buy the insurance.
Right.
That's what brands are all about. What video do you get the most inquiry about, in your judgment?
Based on the ones I've made?
Yeah. Like, what are people...
Commitment, running in the rain, basically the idea of... They're similar. Kind of paying a price to get a reward. Right.
My favorite video you did was the one you did about Heraclides.
The
story.
Yeah, that's a good story. That really, it makes it relevant.
Talk about that. That one's good. Have you ever heard or seen the one in Eddie's channel? It's about Heraclides. I'll give you a backstory. He was a general, and there's debate over who said what, but he needed replacement soldiers, and he was losing a battle, and all was at risk. And he wrote a letter, famous letter, I believe it was.
Yeah. So what he says is, for every 100 troops, 80% are just targets. He says 10 shouldn't even be here. 9 are the real warriors, and we should be grateful for them because they, make the battle. But the one. And he goes, he will bring the others back.
Yeah.
And it just gets you jacked up, because you want to embody that. You want to tell yourself the story that you can physically, mentally be that, create that for yourself, for others. But that's narrative. You got to believe it,
Yeah. I saw you do that speech in Boston. You played the video, which was really also auditory, visual. You had the visualizations and the words, and it was really. And at the end, everybody in the audience thought they could be the one,
right?
And it led them believe in themselves, which I think is so cool. The one. That's my favorite. That's a good story. That's a good story.
All narrative.
I got a question for you. So, if storytelling is so powerful, and we've done it since the beginning of time, why do you think we got away from it? From people, from personal people, or just businesses in general, stop telling stories?
I don't think we got away from it, because that's what we do. I mean, that's in one capacity or another, we're thinking stories and we're telling stories. I just think, particularly with business, like we're talking about now, we don't realize how important it is. And it's not something that you either have or you don't, right? Everyone has the capacity to become incredible at it. And I think what we're saying is it's in your best interest to be a really good storyteller, because that's how you change the world. That's how you persuade people. The best world leaders, the best CEOs, the people that really create change, they're not throwing data points up.
Right.
They're emotionally captivating their audience and you know, channeling the desired result.
Yeah, that's Disney was the great storyteller, right?
He's one of the best.
They inspire hope. That's what he said. They inspire hope, and they do it again and again and again. Just keep telling stories. You have about 200 stories.
Yeah.
In fact, we got a new app coming out that we built that's going to be able to search if you want motivation, or you want commitment, or you want drive, or you want team. It's kind of cool.
I can't wait for that.
Cool. But on stories, the concept of stories, Steve, I just read this as well. And I'm, growing the Instagram, and we're growing those accounts up pretty good now. And thank you for everyone who's following us. But the thing that's driving this, both Facebook and Instagram, is the stories part. That's like the most action coming out of the story part.
Yeah,
people want to hear that, because we're telling stories. We're just not doing it around the campfire anymore.
Right.
And we're not doing it around the water cooler anymore, because there are no more water coolers, right?
Yeah.
Where'd they go?
People love it because it's raw. It's like just face to camera. There's no editing. There's no magical stuff going on. Right. It's you and the words you're telling.
So let's do a case study on your next your next TED Talk. Right? From chaos to clarity. Break it down.
Okay.
What do you think you do? Let's be a little raw.
I think if I'm talking about chaos to clarity, basically how these two things supplement each other, how you need both of them. We tend to think like clarity is what we want. So that's where we naturally gravitate towards, not realizing that it's like, no, the chaos creates the clarity. You have to remember that. And so you got to put your name on the dotted line for these, arguably every day, something that creates discomfort, something that puts you outside of your comfort zone, because guess what? Tomorrow the floor is going to raise a little bit, and what made you uncomfortable yesterday no longer makes you uncomfortable tomorrow, right? Or today. And so that sort of helps build you up, build your identity, build your foundation. It allows you to experiment, to see who you are, what's meaningful, what you care about in the world, how you can give value back to the world. And then from that comes that clarity. So it's, it's almost like, to use your TED Talks metaphor, broken, rebuilt stronger, re-break, build stronger, re-break, build stronger.
Yeah, again and again.
Yeah.
We were in the Caymans doing some brainstorming. Remember that?
I do.
And we were driving to the. We were going to some bar, I guess. I don't drink anymore, but I like to hang out with you. But the cab driver goes, he goes, there's a lot of bars here. And then what does she say? There's also a lot of churches.
Yep.
I said, well, yeah, they keep each other in business.
Exactly.
That's chaos and clarity right there, is it, right?
It's a perfect metaphor, yeah.
We were laughing about that. Like, no, you got a lot of bars, you got a lot of churches. They keep each other.
Feedback loop, right?
Chaos is the fuel for clarity, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
And what happens when you get clear? You got to redo it again.
Well, the problem is,
right?
You can get that clarity and get comfortable. And I've done it. You've done it. Like it's you have to ingrain it in yourself. It's like, okay, time to step back off.
Yeah.
You got to break it so you can fix it.
Boredom is bad.
Boredom is bad.
If you can get results with little effort, you're in serious jeopardy of having something come and get you, because you're not watching it. Right. And that comes from extreme expertise. We talked about that 2 episodes ago, right? Extreme expertise with extreme focus gives extreme results, which give options, which create the relentless pursuit of too much.
Right.
Yeah. Chaos. That's going to be a good TED Talk. So you need three steps. Let's do a case study. We need 3 steps to grow from chaos to clarity. What would be the first one?
I think experimentation in some capacity.
Self-experiment.
Right.
Yeah, you use that a lot.
I do. It's such an important thing. Life is an experiment.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at it playfully like that, it just, for me, it removes the stress. It removes like the pressure and the expectations. It's like, it means a lot. Like these little shifts in perspective, they don't seem like a lot, but they're everything to me. It's like, this is fun. This is just an adventure. And you can lose 99 times But dude, maybe that 100th changes everything, you know? So, you gonna ask something?
I was like, wouldn't story also, like what we're talking about here, be one of the steps?
Yeah.
Like the visualization, you hear a lot about that, right? Isn't that basically a story?
Like how you're looking at the world?
Yeah, like where you want to be. What's clarity look like for you? Don't you have to kind of create that vision of what that looks like? That's a story.
Yeah, and I think, well, it's sort of carved through that experimentation, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like you create that clarity by, moving, being mobile, not sitting around, but attacking life. And then you can kind of carve out that space for yourself. Right. But yeah, I mean, Carmine talks about identity, that's huge. But I think, you can say you are something, right? I can say I'm a firefighter, but that doesn't mean much until you go out into the world and you experiment and you really create that for yourself. Right. And then your actions start sort of supporting that thesis, but they go hand in hand, Yeah,
the self-experiment is so huge because you got to try like models. There's different models. Like these books are all loaded up with different models, different modalities,
right?
Different mentors.
But you gotta live it.
Yeah, there's like they're everywhere, and you got to try and see if it works for you. Because everyone, I think I said this a couple episodes ago. Like Charlie Munger says, to the man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right.
And
right.
There's no one answer for anything. But if you're going from chaos to clarity, and you have self-experiment, a story, right? Mm-hmm. Visualization. What else? Let's bang this out. 3 steps.
So if you take the confidence is earned, Ryan Holiday quote, right? So you have the experiment where you learn about yourself, where you learn to tell a story. You learn to sort of craft the narrative that's most important to you. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's a sustainable system. Algorithms for success, mm-hmm. And the consistent trial and error.
That's pretty good. It's pretty good off the cuff, huh?
Not bad.
3-step process. That'll be your TED Talk. We can tighten that up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so, I mean the thing is, it's the crux of everything, So I could go on that for weeks. It would just be narrowing it down to like what's most important,
right?
Yeah. But yeah, experimentation, identity, systems, algorithms, and then the courage to fail, recreate, fail, recreate, fail, recreate.
Yeah, the loop.
Yeah.
The loop, because clarity perceived to be happiness. Because I think early on it's happiness, and then I think it kind of changes it and morphs into
progress is happiness.
Yeah, right. I think you're right. Yeah, I think more is better.
But though.
Which is this is philosophical.
Was it just
philosophy? Philosophical.
Was it just us chatting? I forget when we were talking about like if you need both, because if you're in a constant state of chaos, that's unhealthy.
Right.
Right. So you need to be able to sort of recover and ultimately capture some type of whatever your benchmark is or your measurement of success. Because you don't want to always be in a state of chaos. You don't want to always be in a state of clarity. It's the yin and the yang. You need them both.
Well, the cortisol, that's the adrenaline. That's the fight or flight hormone that the body, over the last 2 million years or whatever, has been designed to give you an ability to react quickly.
Yeah.
And I've studied this a little bit. It's if you're in a state of constant chaos, your body's like loaded with that stuff, and you're not using it. So it's really super unhealthy for your organs to be like loaded with that. That's what causes stress. It ultimately causes disease. Yeah, it causes all kinds of different. No, we're not doctors here, are we?
No, but I read that though. Stress is the number one cause of cancer, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, which is it's interesting because we talked about a little bit like Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow. Mm. When you're in flow and you're doing something that you love and you're just flowing, you're releasing all that. You're in a state of I don't know, clarity. It's probably clarity. It's flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. That's a good point.
When you lose track of time, that's the best.
Yeah. It's a good book too. Is finding your flow. Because if you have a story, circling back to the beginning, you may have a story. You may have a message. Let's say what's important to me. I think teaching people that they can have, with a very little bit of effort, they can make progress towards this very big thing. You know, I use the metaphor of the dominoes in my, in my TED talk and my speeches. Like, little domino can knock over this big domino. Right. It just can't do it right away. You got to build progress and momentum. But if you have a message or a story, and you want to combine those into something short and succinct that could move the dial in your for-profit or for-purpose movement, this book is, I think it's absolutely fantastic way to start.
Yeah.
The algorithm, the steps, the recipes are all in the book. In fact, we gave many of them to you today.
Yeah, definitely a must-do. Big picture, and there's some great details in there. Like you mentioned, the steps to telling a good story. Like, I always feel like that's important, and it's very helpful, and I'm going to use it tactically. But with stuff like this, it's the big picture stuff for me that I get the most, because I'm just like, fundamentally, big picture, I'm looking at things wrong. It's like I can change a little bit and have a huge impact in just the stories that I tell every single day, you know?
Remember we went to the Cayman, Steve. You were where were you, in New Delhi or
Bali.
something? You were in Bali, yeah. I don't know where you were. You were gone. He's gone for like 2 weeks. So we did 4 episodes real quick, and then we all did things. So while you were gone, Eddie and I went to the Caymans. We were going to do some business planning, and we didn't do a lot. We did a lot of storytelling and talking, because we're both reading Homo Deus, right? And we already both read Sapiens, which talks about talk about big picture and story,
right?
And we're trying to say, like, where does this podcast lead you? And we're leveraging books and the knowledge and wisdom, all these mentors that wrote these books and made all these mistakes, because these revolutions have happened, like the man's defeat of getting eaten by dinosaurs. Like they overcame that. Now they're animals that used to threaten to kill us are in our zoos. And scarce food. 12,000 years ago, we've domesticated food, and then with the Industrial Revolution, now we have, this is what we came up with. You should be happy to know this, because we didn't tell you this yet. Now we have the artificial intelligent revolution, 30 times bigger and 300 times more impact than the Industrial Revolution. Like, things are going to change
fast, and
you need to be on the front of it, of changing.
Yeah,
isn't that cool?
It's amazing. Yeah, I think the ability to, tell your story, to recreate yourself in a way that provides you the freedom and flexibility to, we're in a fast-paced, changing world, and yeah, I mean, like they say in Homo Deus, it's like it's coming quick. It's going to be a big thing. So, yeah, the ability to articulate that's huge.
Now, 47% of all jobs are at risk right now, for being replaced by computer algorithms that do them better. The good news is you have enough lead time, and we have the ability. Remember, Steve, we were talking about this today. This story that we're telling each other and telling everyone right now is going to be heard by hundreds and thousands of people instantly. 20 years ago, when I first started the insurance business, if I wanted to tell 2,000 people this story, how would I do it?
Oh man, maybe like the outlet newspapers, phone calls, door to door,
direct mail. Yeah, it would have cost me thousands of dollars or thousands of hours. I wouldn't have been able to do it. There's no way.
Right.
What's good about having a story now is you can access tens of thousands of people instantly through these social networks.
Right.
So recreating yourself is completely available. It's not just like for the birds. It's like, do it.
It's everything. And the pros and cons to that, are, like you said, at level playing field. Everyone can do it, and that's why it's amazing. But that means the best storytellers rise to the top. And the people that don't articulate that message, and they don't communicate their story well, they don't emotively reach an audience, they'll get lost in the minutia. So it's a further incentive to really understand, what your message is, your one sentence delivery, your brand, what you're trying to tell, so that you can do that in an effective way.
Right.
That's what a crowded playing field ultimately brings about. The best rise to the top, right?
Absolutely.
So
it's a good story. Which leads us to the next book. I kind of forgot what it is. Do you know?
Riveted right here.
Stevie, why riveted?
Riveted, the science of why jokes make us laugh, movies make us cry, and religious makes us feel one with the universe.
You and I had a discussion over why we wanted this book. You were coming from the storyteller perspective.
Yeah. So I just love, we're talking today about stories and, how emotion sort of makes the human race go round. Riveted does a great job of explaining why we feel the way we do, and even gives you tips like understanding basic, human psychology helps you as the storyteller alter your delivery and the way you talk and in the way you message.
Right. Yeah. My perspective on Riveted was this is what makes the cash register ring.
Yeah,
so
we came at it from different
Let's
angles.
pretend you've gone through our you decide to go on a journey, right? You've made decisions you've cut, which is essentialism. You've figured out your one thing. You've made your habits, which are the first 4. And now you have a story, and now you need to market the story. So you need to make the cash register ring, or you need to create a movement. You need to have a powerful message in there, and you got to figure out what Riveted is. So it was funny. Eddie went right to exactly as the storyteller, and I went to the capitalist bucket. Sorry, still.
And the jackpot is somewhere right in the middle.
Absolutely, yeah. The science and the art.
Well, what do you think, man? Wrap?
I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, it was an awesome podcast. I had a blast.
Right.
Maybe, Steve, for the next one we can talk about getting some questions out, or maybe even stepping into the live space or something.
Yeah, we'll let you know. And if you have any questions right now, you could tweet us, Instagram us, DM, whichever way you want to do it. And yeah, we'll try to get them on the podcast.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, any thoughts, ideas, or things you want us to talk about? Anyone listening, send them our way. We'll carve out a segment at the end to go through everything. It'll be fun.
Awesome.
But awesome. Well, hey, until next time, Your Voice to the World podcast. I'm Eddie.
Terrence McMahon.
Later.
Take care.